the same audio example. You see this file here? This is a rhythm guitar hitting a big power chord. It should be pretty obvious. Now the guitar player actually laid down a couple of different takes. You see we got 4 different takes in there. So there's 4 different ideas in the guitar track. And what we want to do here is we want to create a composite. We want to comp together the best parts of those 4 tracks. So how are we going to do that? Well, I can say, turn all of those takes into tracks. And the digital performer will unpack the takes and put them into their own separate tracks. That's one way to approach it. Another way is to select a bunch of audio tracks, any combination of audio tracks, and absorb those tracks into a single track as takes. So I can explode the tracks out, explode the takes out into their own tracks. I can collapse tracks back in as takes. Now we'll go over into our sequence editor. And take a look here, and here's that guitar track. Alright, we'll zoom in. And now what I'm going to do is, I'm going to say, alright, let's, instead of turning the takes into the tracks, I'm going to say, just show me those takes. Just show me the takes that are in the track. And here they are. Now we see 1, 2, 3, 4 takes. And then we've got what looks like a 5th take up here. What's going on? Let's highlight that so we can see the difference. And what's happened is this take was put into here. This is a new comp take. When I said show the takes, a new take was created called a comp take. And the take that was current is initially put into that comp take. So there's that soundbite. Now if I choose other takes, they get dropped in as soundbites into the comp take. So I'm going to start off with the rhythm guitar with that big hit. But after the first bar, I think that I want to use a little bit of this take right here. So I'll drag and drop with my comp tool, and now what I've done is I've created a soundbite and dropped that into the comp take. And of course, I can grab that soundbite and move it around anywhere I want. It's a soundbite, put it where you like. Go up here and we'll do another comp. And whatever I click on, well, that's what I'm using in my comp. Alright, so we'll give this a quick listen. Takes can also be used basically as tracks. There they are. There's your takes. You've got a separate automation pan, put your own plugins on there. So if I do some comping and then I want to turn on one of my other takes, multiple takes if I like for doubling or the harmonies perhaps, do that. Now somebody's gone to some trouble to do a little bit of editing in this take here, so I made a range selection over these edited sound bites. Now instead of using the comp tool, I'm just going to go to this menu and say divide the comp at the selection or the soundbite boundaries. And so now this selection is moved up into the comp track as comp. Alright, let's hide those takes. So now we have created a new take, which is the comp take. If you look in here, we see here's our first 4 original takes, and then the comp take. We can name them if we like, keep track of what we're doing. We're going to say new take, new empty take, blank space ready to record into. And we'll say show the takes again. We're going to explode them out again. And this time, we open up the take container. Let's zoom them down so they're all the same size. You can see what we're looking at here. A little bit smaller. Okay, here's our 4 original takes. Here's the comp take that we created. Here's the new take that we brought in, the new empty take, and of course that shows up in a new comp take. So you can have as many comp takes as you like. I'll go get my comp tool, and here's my first comp take. I'm going to take a little bit of that and a little bit of this. So I'm now comping the comp, if you will. Comping the comp. So very flexible comping features, and this is all part of DP6. Let's review what we've just seen. Track comping. Expand takes to tracks, collapse tracks to takes. Hide and show takes. When we show the takes, that's when the new comp take is created. We can have unlimited comps, as many different comps as we want. The takes work just like tracks. They can be play-enabled, they can have independent automation and plugins. And we've got that cool comp tool for making our comps. Let's talk about new audio file format support. We'll talk about broadcast wave, AIFF, and sound designer. We'll talk about interleaved audio. We'll talk about recording and playing into floating point audio files. I'll show you. Digital performer preferences, I go to audio options, and now I can choose the default format for digital performer. What is the audio format? Is it broadcast wave? Is it AIFF? Is it sound designer? That's my choice. And I can choose whether or not to work with interleaved files. I can record and play interleaved files or not, my choice. What interleaved means is, let's say we got a piece of stereo audio. How many files is that? 2 files for left and right, or 1 file that contains left and right inside that single file. And it works not just for stereo files, but also surround sound. I may have 1 file that has 6 channels of audio, surround sound file. So I can choose to work with interleaved or de-interleaved audio. I can choose the sample format, 16-bit, 24-bit, or 32-bit floating point. So I can record directly into a 32-bit floating point file. And the bit depth that I'm recording at always shows up in the control palette, so at a glance, I know what bit depth I'm recording at. Now, while I'm in the preferences, let's take a look at this. This is the plugin preferences, and these are all of the plugins that ship with Digital Performer. And here are all my audio unit plugins down here. What we can do is we can have sets of plugins, and we can decide which set of plugins is going to load when we launch Digital Performer. Remember under Macintosh OS 8 and OS 9, you had something called an extension manager, right? You could have sets of extensions, so when you turned on the computer, you could specify which extensions were loading. This is basically extension manager for your plugins. Now, why would I need that? Why wouldn't I just load all of my plugins every time I launch the application? 2 reasons. Plugins use up system resources. Even if they're not being used inside your sequence, they're using up a little bit of RAM because the operating system has to register them in. The other thing that's happening with plugins is as the program launches, any copy protected plugin has got to check in with its copy protection, and that takes time. Excuse me. So maybe I'm going to do some live tracking, and I don't need any plugins. I just want to launch Digital Performer as quickly as possible, so I'll have a plugin set with no plugins loaded into it. Maybe I'll have another plugin set with just my virtual instruments. Maybe I'll have a 3rd plugin set with all of my favorite mix plugins. So management of plugins. We've also enhanced the audio unit support in Digital Performer. Sidechain inputs, multiple outputs for audio unit instruments, ramp automation for audio units. If you're using one of those native instruments, guitar rig foot controllers, that generates a certain type of audio unit ramp automation. That's all supported in DP. You won't get any feedback here, I'm telling you that. So plugin features, plugin management, audio unit sidechain input, multiple output for virtual instruments, and audio unit ramp automation. Let's talk about some new virtual instrument features. Pre-rendering of virtual instruments. This is a big deal. Let me explain what's going on. Now, a year ago, I came here and demonstrated Digital Performer version 5, and we showed up a file that was running 1,600 effects plugins, 1,600 effects plugins, and that was on a 4-core Intel Mac. Yes, Digital Performer takes advantage of all the processors. I'm running an 8-core Mac today, and yes, DP is taking advantage of multiple processors. It's done that for a long time. But how were we able to run 1,600 plugins? Well, last year we introduced something called pre-rendering of effects. What pre-rendering does is you've got an audio track, you've got effects on there. Digital Performer uses a little bit of RAM, it uses a RAM buffer, and it processes the audio track through the effects ahead of time. It pre-renders. So when you hit play, you're just playing back audio tracks. DP is constantly looking ahead, doing the processing, and this results in very good efficiency. So we were running 1,600 plugins last year. Now what we've done is we've introduced pre-rendering virtual instruments.